What's on? Chris here from theinkslinger.co.uk, here with another thrilling episode of the Word Slinger. And what a week it's been! There has been so much news coming out this week in all of genre departments that I literally couldn't work out what I was going to talk about. So actually, here's today's three big stories. First of all, we have our first look at Aquaman, or if you are in the States, Aquaman. There you go. See, we are all inclusive here. We've got Indiana Jones reboot news. Is that a good thing? Not sure. And also, has the Marvel Cinematic Universe found its Spider-Man? But first, a couple of stories that I wanted to talk about, but the main stories actually I thought had more depth to them, but also I just couldn't let some of these things go. The first thing is actually that we've got a release date of Dungeons 2 from developer Realmforge, publisher Calypso Media. If you are unaware of this game, it is basically, as far as I can tell, the what's the best way to put it? I guess like the love child of EA and Bullfrog's original Dungeon Keeper and Dungeon Keeper 2, and not in fact the horrendous mistake that was EA, and I don't remember the name of the publisher actually, and it's probably a good idea. Well, publisher was actually EA, but the guys who created it, the just horrific iOS and Android version of Dungeon Keeper that basically took everybody's fond memories of a fantastic game and just went yeah. So Dungeons 2 is coming out on the 24th of April, and that's going to be on Mac and Windows and SteamOS. Stay tuned, because I'll probably talk about that a little bit more when it comes closer. Something else that came up in the news this week that piqued my interest was that in the States, Interstellar, Chris Nolan's Interstellar, has been doing the rounds again at IMAX theatres, this time with an extra 12 minutes. That's 13, idiot. 12 minutes, okay? It still basically doesn't work. Let's pretend I never did that and I'll never do it again. 12 minutes of extra footage. Now, that film, I went to see it. It was so long. And if you've been to see it, then you also know how long it was. Don't get me wrong, I actually enjoyed it right up until the point where it was, I don't know how to bleep stuff yet, so I won't actually say the word that comes to mind. Do we really need an extra 12 minutes in that film? If it's 12 minutes of a good bit, fair enough. If it's 12 minutes of the total BS at the other end, then let's not. If you disagree with me about the ending of Interstellar, sound off in the comments below. And also something else that piqued my interest from Macworld. Apple are going to be releasing a public beta test of their next operating system for the iPhone and iPads, iOS 9. But before that, they're going to be releasing a very closed public beta with iOS 8.3 mid-March. Excuse me. Now, iOS 8.3 has been released to developers, registered Apple developers, for about 2 weeks now. And this is the first time, as far as I'm aware, it's the first time that Apple has actually released a public beta. Now, there was a large public beta of 1 million test users for OS 10 Yosemite last summer. I don't know whether they actually had 1 million people. I know of at least 2 people who signed up and didn't actually download Yosemite. So I guess it's a bit hit and miss, that idea. But so I was part of that beta test, and apart from the fact that my Mac didn't work properly for 3 months, I still really enjoyed the experience. So as soon as that public beta for iOS 9 comes out, I will probably be signing up for that. And anyway, again, more news about that as it comes. That was the quick stories. That lasted a little bit longer than I was anticipating, but it turns out I do have stuff that I wanted to talk about them. But on to the big news. So first of all, I think like the day after I published last week's episode of the Word Slinger, there was a tweet from Zack Snyder, who is the director of the forthcoming Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice movie, and he tweeted a picture of our first look at Jason Momoa as Aquaman. And it was pretty exciting to see, to be completely honest. Still not entirely sure where Aquaman's going to fit into this film. I mean, we already know that we've got Wonder Woman is going to be in the Batman vs Superman film. So now we've got Aquaman as well. I think I actually sounded off on my blog probably a couple of months ago now about, are we actually going to see the entire Justice League coming in on Batman versus Superman? But as far as I know, they're actually sticking with the four. But this image was released. It said "Unite the Seven" over Jason Momoa, looking like an absolute badass. And actually, interestingly enough, not that much like traditional comic book Aquaman, who, as you know, is very blonde, and occasionally pictured with a beard, occasionally pictured without. Certainly with the New 52 continuity, he has not been bearded. He's been pictured to be a lot younger. Basically, it's Jason Momoa looking an awful lot like Jason Momoa in every other thing that he's been in. That's Game of Thrones. Conan the Barbarian, actually, he didn't have a beard, but basically looked a lot like Aquaman apart from that. And of course, my personal favourite, Stargate Atlantis, that is certainly the first time I'd seen him in anything. So it's a very interesting move from the traditional Aquaman look. And I wonder why we're going to have it like that. I'm interested to see a little bit more about Aquaman, even though I guess he's always been a little bit of a joke character. I never really got in on that. I think that came from a certain era, whereas maybe Aquaman was just doing ridiculous things in his comics, and so he's got this sort of stigma about being the fish-talking superhero. It's interesting. I don't know how Marvel have managed to avoid that with their character, Namor the Submariner, who is basically the exact same character as Aquaman, except he's got wings on his feet. But why do you need that to swim underwater? Who actually knows? But I think a lot of people forget that Aquaman is probably like a really powerful character. He's very, very strong. You think he lives right at the bottom of a very deep part of the ocean. So he is able to withstand the crushing high pressure environment. Also, I suppose he could talk to fish. Of course, he had that amazing super move in Justice Gods Among Us, where he would call in a shark to eat his opponent. So I'm kind of interested to see what they're going to do with Aquaman. And let's face it, they can't do any worse than the absolutely abysmal attempt to bring an Aquaman into Smallville way back on the CW. I'm not even sure what season that was. I think it was maybe season 2, season 3. It was early on. They were going to turn it into a spin-off. Did not work because it was rubbish. Anyway, so if you have any thoughts about the new Aquaman, sound off in the comments. Something else that piqued my interest this week, something that makes me a little bit angry, a little bit upset. We're talking reboots again. This time they're talking about Indiana Jones, rebooting Indiana Jones. Now, we know that Indy 4 came out years ago now, I suppose. I'm in previous episodes been really good with my dates, but it escapes me when Indy 4 came out. I'm going to hang a guess and say that it was about 4-5 years ago. So we're talking maybe 2011, possibly 2010. And it was met with mixed reactions, as is becoming a little bit of a running theme on the Word Slinger. I kind of liked it. I found it perfectly plausible. A lot of people really hate, spoilers by the way, a lot of people just completely hate the extraterrestrial element of Indy 4. And I'm not entirely sure why they can't separate the extraterrestrials from the Nazi melting chest hidden in the desert. To me, they're kind of in the same. It's all basically the same thing. Okay, it's not implausible, but there has been a lot of talk about Indy 5, and it's just been sort of doing a rounds on the internet, and not really anything much is coming from it. It's fairly obvious Harrison Ford is getting a little bit old to be playing the action hero. He's obviously coming back for a Star Wars Episode 7 as Han Solo. I'm not entirely convinced that's going to be such a good idea. Obviously, somebody, J.J. Abrams, thought it was a good idea. But this is the guy who wanted to bring Leonard Nimoy into the previous 2 Star Trek films. So he obviously just likes a little bit of continuity there. But now they're talking about rebooting it. And this week, there's been a report, I got my information from IGN, that Steven Spielberg is interested in directing the reboot. Fair enough. That film is basically his love child with George Lucas. and they say he's waiting for a script. Do we need to reboot it? I mean, it's a classic. If they tried to remake Back to the Future, I'm sure that an awful lot of people would get really, really upset. I mean, look at the Amazing Spider-Man films. They were just awful, just so bad. And that's what can happen with a reboot. I suppose there's this real difference at the moment between what used to be considered just a flat out remake. If you think about the I Am Legend. Okay, I Am Legend is actually, I think, the third time that film's been made. Certainly one of those times is the Omega Man with Charlton Heston, and I think the original might have actually been also called I Am Legend. Not sure. That's certainly what the book was called, and that was basically just a flat-out remake of the same story. That's fair enough. And also, like, several decades apart, when the Spider-Man reboot came along, we were like less than a decade out of the first Spider-Man film, let alone Spider-Man 3. So that was, and then it just went back and retold the whole story. So are we going to be seeing this again? Are we going to be seeing the early adventures of Indiana Jones? And by the way, they're talking about Chris Pratt. Fair, good, nothing against Chris Pratt. He kind of came out of nowhere and is suddenly in everything. He was, I think he came first in the Lego Movie, and then was in Guardians of the Galaxy, of course, and then he's going to be in Jurassic World. I know he was in Parks and Rec, which I've actually never seen, so I can't comment on it at all. But suddenly he's the guy who's going to be in everything. And they're talking about him playing Indiana Jones. Now, he has actually come out and said a couple of days ago, I think when he was on the red carpet for the Oscars night, he's basically said, this is not currently a thing. Nobody has spoken to me about being in this. However, there is such a long history in Hollywood of actors saying, I don't know anything about that. And then it turns out that, oh yeah, by the way, I have actually been cast in that film for so long now. I think actually going back to our last story, Jason Momoa was basically sort of saying for ages, I'm not going to be in a superhero film. And then suddenly it's like, by the way, I'm Aquaman, and I have been for such a long time. The Rock is exactly the same. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, has been cast in the Shazam film as Black Adam. And for so long, he was saying, no, I don't know anything. And a lot of fans were just really hoping that he was going to be Green Lantern. And I think a lot of people got excited when he turned out to be Black Adam. Personally, I don't know, actually. Would he have been a good Green Lantern? I'm still kind of hoping they'll go back with Hal Jordan. But I am so digressing. We're on Indiana Jones. So, do they really need to reboot this film franchise? I personally think no. I think they should leave it alone. I'm well up for something like the Predators movie that came out again a few years ago now. That just... It was classed as a reboot, and I guess they were hoping that they were going to go places with that film. And I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't make another one, but they did basically just say, yeah, there's all this previous continuity. We're not gonna really touch on it that much. Or I think they did just briefly touch on it, just with a really brief mention about the original Predator movie, but. They just went in a totally different direction, did a completely different story. There was no need to replace anything. The Amazing Spider-Man just took the Sam Raimi films and just went, get rid, and we'll just start from scratch. And I think it'd be a real shame if we see an Indiana Jones film that takes Raiders of the Lost Ark. Temple of Doom, I've never been that fussed about. I haven't actually watched that film for so many years because I don't think that much of it. But certainly The Last Crusade. And even, yes, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. If they take those four movies and say, these never happened, we're starting again, that would be really sad. That would be like the death of my childhood, and certainly the death of the childhoods of a lot of people of my generation as well. That said, anything is better than the direction they were hinting at in Indy 4, which is Shia LaBeouf taking over. No, that would be bad. And so that brings us on to our third and final story this evening. And that is fairly breaking news, actually. Just the last 12 to 24 hours, this has sort of started to do the rounds. Has Marvel found its cinematic universe version of Spider-Man. Now, this rumor comes from Jeff Snyder from The Wrap. Now, he actually gave this comment during an interview that he was giving during an Oscars program. And he has basically said that he is 95% sure that Spider-Man is not going to be white. That pretty much rules out Peter Parker. Unless they're going to suddenly go with a black Peter Parker, which I guess, why not? Because Marvel, 20th Century Fox is going with a black Johnny Storm in the new Fantastic Four film. That said, looking forward to when a decent trailer for that comes out so that I can rubbish that as well. But he said maybe he'll be black, maybe he'll be Latino, and that is basically pointing in a direction of, yes, Miles Morales. And I kind of hope I'm pronouncing that right because I'm not 100% sure. Now, for those of you who don't know, Miles Morales has been the Spider-Man of the Marvel Ultimate Universe, I think since 2011 now. So he's been going for a while, 4 years. Obviously, the Marvel Ultimate Universe is coming to an end when Secret Wars comes out starting in May. I think that the general consensus is that Miles will end up being stuck on this just horrible sounding battle world that Marvel are concocting, because he is pretty much the main driving force behind the Ultimate Comics, certainly in the last couple of years. Although that's kind of not really the fault of the readers. I think the readers are willing to read stuff in Marvel, Ultimate Marvel. But I don't know if there's really been that much put out for them. I think there's only been 3 books maybe in Ultimate Marvel, certainly over the last couple of years. So what's really the driving force to go ahead? Anyway, so Ultimate Marvel came out around 2001, and it was kind of off the back of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man film. Marvel suddenly decided, let's get a good jumping on point for new readers, and which actually I was at the time. I was just getting into the comic books off the back of that film as well. So they said, let's just create not like do what DC do and just say, we need to encourage new readers in. Let's just say that none of that ever happened. A little bit like the Indiana Jones reboot. Marvel actually said, let's just create a completely separate publication. We'll call it Ultimate Marvel. We'll start everything from scratch. All of your favourite characters are there, but they're kind of starting new, but it was now, or rather it was then, because it's now like 12, 13, 14 years ago. And I read Ultimate Spider-Man for a couple of years, and I read Ultimate X-Men for a little bit. I read Ultimate Fantastic Four, I think, for the first year that it was out. And I liked it. I did like the Ultimate stuff. Actually, I read the Ultimates, which is the ultimate version of the Avengers. I had a couple of those hardback books. They were really, really good. Excuse me. And pretty much that is where the current Marvel Cinematic Universe has been based from. The biggest thing is the Triskelion, which is the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, and it has been in Captain America Winter Soldier and in Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So that came straight out of Ultimate Marvel. There is none of that in standard Marvel Universe. Although, will it be on Battle World? Maybe there'll be 6 of them. Who actually knows? But I don't know Miles Morales. I have not read much with him. In fact, I think the only thing I've read with him in was the Spider-Man crossover book, where Peter Parker ends up in Ultimate Universe and goes on an adventure with Miles. So I've read that, and I didn't really get that much from the character in that book. He just, apart from that, he seemed to be like an inexperienced kid. I know the all new X-Men are currently faffing around in the Ultimate Universe. I'm not really sure what's going to happen there when that collides with the standard universe. Maybe they'll come back first, or maybe with the collision they'll end up back on Battleworld. I am reading that series, but I'm not fully up to date with it, so I'm not sure. So I know Miles is involved with that. I guess I'll see a bit of him there. And I know that Miles has been involved fairly heavily with the Spider-Men crossover book. Not Spider-Men, sorry, the Spider-Verse book, where I think you've got just Spider-Men and women from across the whole multiverse, which has been a fairly big Marvel event. Kind of a small event, I guess, because it's just centered on the Spider-Man continuity. So I know there's a lot of potential out there for Miles, and I know he's got a huge fan base. There's a dedicated readership who don't really have anything to do with standard Marvel Universe. They'll read Ultimate Universe. Probably the guys who came on board around the same time as I did, but actually, whereas I sort of tested the waters on both universes and then made my choice, they possibly either did the same thing, stuck with Ultimate, or maybe just went in with Ultimate because it wasn't bogged down with any continuity. So there's this loyal fan base, and I feel a little bit sad for them that the Ultimate Universe is basically being destroyed. But I feel sorry for anyone who's a Marvel fan, really, because I'm just not really a fan of this whole Battle World idea, as I'm sure I'll talk about in coming weeks. But I guess the idea of having Miles Morales in in the Marvel Cinematic Universe does make a lot of sense, because we don't. I think I speak for all fans of any Spider-Man film that we just don't need to see it rebooted again. We don't need to see it rebooted again, Marvel / Sony. Okay, we really don't want to see that. And when I say reboot, I mean like just with Uncle Ben and Norman Osborn, and we just don't need any of that. We really, really don't. So I guess having Miles would be a really, really good way around that. But I kind of feel, because Peter Parker is my Spider-Man. I've been a massive fan of Spidey since, 2001, since that film came out. And I love those Sam Raimi films. And I hated the Mark Webb films, but I still watched them because they were Spider-Man films. And will I watch them again? Possibly. I'm going to go probably, but maybe like once. And then I remember that how much I hate them. So to me, I have no connection with Miles Morales. If he comes in and becomes part of the Avengers, which is what everyone wants to see, will it have the same powerful impact if it's not Peter Parker Spider-Man joining the Avengers? Because let's face it, that's what everyone wants to see. Everyone who loves these Avengers films and who loves the Avengers books really wants to see Peter Parker and Wolverine. To be fair, everyone wants to see Wolverine in the Avengers. Well, in the mainstream comics, certainly before he died, Wolverine was in the Avengers along with Spider-Man. That's what everyone wants to see. Not convinced anyone wants to see Miles Morales in a film. I would be kind of interested to see it, but a little bit disappointed along the way. Anyway, it's kind of like neither here nor there, because actually also when Sony and Marvel announced that they'd made this deal, which was I think 2 weeks ago, Doug Belgrad from Sony Entertainment actually said that the Spider-Man film would have Peter Parker, and that there would be a 2017 solo movie featuring Peter Parker plus a Civil War appearance featuring Peter Parker. So who actually knows? In the world of Hollywood, I guess these things are not set in stone until, well, these days, like they could make a trailer and still change a whole bunch of things. So who actually knows? I guess we'll have to wait and see. That probably wraps it up from me this week. I think I've said quite enough. And so I guess I just have a few things to say. Don't forget you can visit me at www.theinkslinger.co.uk. Best thing to do is come say hi to me on Twitter. You can find me at Lord_Chancellor. And of course, if you have anything to say, you can sound off in the comments below. Thanks very much for listening. It's been great to see you. Until next week, laters.